Hello, hello. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Krista White. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Crow Canyon, and we're excited to talk to you today about NITRO request management for food and beverage manufacturers leveraging M365. And I'm joined today by our COO, Jeff Priest, and our Solutions Engineer, Ryan Stefani. We are Crow Canyon. We've been in business for 24 years. We are a Microsoft Preferred Business application, and we're also a California Certified Small Business. Now, a couple housekeeping things before we dive into it. We're excited. We've got a lot of things to share with you today. But if you do have any questions as we're going, go ahead and use that question box on the right side there of your screen. Don't be shy. Go ahead, put those questions in. We'll be happy to answer your questions. And if for any reason we don't get to them during the webinar, we'll definitely follow up with you afterwards. We also will be recording this. So if you have any questions, again, it's all going to be recorded. You can go back and watch it again. And then lastly, we're going to be covering a high-level overview of everything today. So if you do have more specific questions, if you want to see a demo, if you want to see, what this might look like for your specific organization, just let us know. We'll be happy to book some time with you and give you a deeper dive. Now, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Jeff here. Jeff, let's go ahead and get started. What do you have for us?
Super. Thanks, Krista. Yeah, I appreciate you joining today to learn a little bit about our request management solutions that we have built out. We'll get in. I have a feeling today that we'll go through this. We actually have quite a few slides, but we'll go through those very quickly. So there's a number of slides. I think that we're going to get some time back on your calendars. We'll probably end early. But the intention today is really kind of to showcase what we have been doing for other companies within the food and beverage industry and how they've been able to leverage our platform to drive business process automation within their organizations, kind of in the form we talked is request management. So this is, if you just think of request management, what that is, we'll go and give you some examples. And then of course there's an opportunity to open up conversations, discuss your personal business needs there. So how we're helping food and beverage manufacturers succeed today in business is we have a platform we call NITRO Studio. NITRO Studio is a platform which we can build and drive business process automation, starting with forms, workflows, automation, etc. We have built off that platform. We built a number of sort of use case specific applications that can be purchased out of just out of box applications. And we'll show you some examples of those today. We'll talk about those, but we have a number of applications that you can just get started with today. That they're already fully built out, they're vetted. They're all based on feedback from customers, and the intent is to, if you have a specific need and we have an application, rather than build, just buy it, and much cheaper, and we can get that up and running within literally hours. On top of that is really about driving self-service, and in this sort of digital transformation process is through chatbots, and building components that get delivered and served up through Teams. And we can go more in depth with that. There's a lot of exciting things that are happening with Teams integration. Now, this is a pretty full infographic here, a lot of stuff here. I guess what I want to focus in terms of this, we will be sending you out a copy of this webinar as well, so you can go through and read and review it in more detail. But I think what I want to focus on here is just, why are people interested in this particular solution to drive these things throughout the organization? One is ease of use. Any application that's going to require extensive amount of training, perhaps even bringing in consultants to help you with, there's a much more significant investment in those kind of things. Not to mention decision making, can be delayed just because you have a lot of other things on your plate. Ease of use, low cost of ownership. We have basically there's a single license that we're paying for, and there's no additional cost along the way. You can build as many applications as you want. Sky's the limit. Requests themselves, we can see a lot of times internally right now, there's many business processes exist. We don't even always acknowledge them as an actual business process, but they exist nonetheless. And many times those communications are coming by way of phone call or maybe an email or a text. We want to still provide those communication channels, but we want to make sure all these things get pushed into a system rather than all these different, locations, whether it be on someone's mobile phone or their inbox or whatever. So requests can still come through email. They can come through web, SharePoint, Teams, and we want to make sure we provide this omni-channel, option in terms of providing a channel of choice for your end users. Lots of things here. I'm going to move on to the next slide, but there's a lot of things here that we can continue to talk about. But right now, what I want to do is just kind of go into this concept of request management. What is it, and what are we even talking about? One is request management. There's a number of requests that happen throughout the organization. The idea is to serve this sort of wide range of users. You have all these different users throughout your organization. There's different departments. There's different sort of internal processes. There's in manufacturing, you have a lot of different things happening. So it's to provide this wide range of service to these users. Also, sort of this idea of better, faster, stronger. I mean, it's just something that we're going to take an antiquated system or something that's manual. We're going to put it in an automated system itself, and that we can just resolve. It just becomes more drive efficiency, and we can resolve things in terms of requests much faster. And also, at the end of the day, we want our employees working within sort of the scope of their work and not having to to handle all these sort of logistical and administrative tasks and get bogged down by that. So that said, request match, get into some specifics. So specifics, examples are IT. Within your IT department, you have a group of people, I'm sure, that are handling requests that are coming from end users, have problems with the laptop. They can't connect to email. They need a password reset within M365. They have a phone that is not, whatever it might be. These requests come, and somebody needs to handle those. So how do they come today? Do you have an IT help desk in place? Maybe you do. We have a whole sort of pitch about the value proposition of running these things within M365, and most of our customers today, they come to us because of that preference. Simplify everything into one system, the system where your employees are working, and primarily that's in Teams. So IT help desk is anything from these trouble tickets, hardware requests. In our IT help desk system, we also have an add-on component to that which is your IT asset tracking and management. So somebody submits a ticket, it's regarding a laptop. What laptop are we referring to? What are the details of that laptop? When was it purchased? Is there a warranty, etc.? So we have these systems coupled, so you get an end-to-end sort of full comprehensive view of what's in your environment, but also how to best solve in these issues for your customers. So a couple other types that we're going to talk about here: facilities management. Again, requests come through. It could be something as simple as, hey, there's a leak in the bathroom in the faucet. There's no paper towels or soap. We have a rack of inventory over here that needs to be moved somewhere. Whatever that might be, requests come in. It could be even within facilities, maybe even having some equipment like a forklift. There's a problem, an issue with the forklift, or someone needs to check it out. Whatever it might be, you can kind of use your imagination of all those things in facilities, whether it be fixes, changes, etc. Those things come by way of a system itself that goes and gets assigned out to somebody, can execute on that, and can complete those tasks. Sort of in the same vein, and this is a little bit different, but it's the idea of somebody having a request around a contract. And contract management includes things like tracking your contracts, knowing which contracts you have. Contracts associated with what? Are they associated with equipment? Are they associated with facilities? Are they associated with a service? When are those renewals? When are they up? We get alerts on those. Who needs to receive those alerts? Who's responsible for renewing those contracts? So it's really a system, again, where all your contracts that reside. We know what's the status of those contracts and all the details around those contracts. It might be a contract that, again, associated with a piece of equipment, and there's actually an IT help desk ticket that came in, or a facilities ticket that came in, and all those three things now can be, through what we call associated items, can be managed and get full visibility within the system itself. As we go on to additional, I guess we went the wrong way. There we go. HR, I guess right now, if you guys are kind of getting the theme, in every particular operational group within the organization, there's an opportunity to leverage request management. So in this case, HR, you have onboarding. What does that onboarding process look like? We find that many companies come to us because they simply don't have an onboarding process, and they need to make this more efficient to make sure that when somebody comes on as a new employee, that they have a satisfactory experience of coming on, making sure that they start day one with whether it be paperwork they're needing to do, whether it's equipment that needs to be assigned to them, training, etc., to make sure that we've created a full workflow of onboarding. All the stakeholders, there's IT out there, there's access to systems, there's all these things that need to happen. But if we can create an actual process, once you submit a request to onboard someone, it automatically pushes people through that process that's been built up front, sort of one and done, and you don't have to every single time have one person that's managing, sort of project managing that onboarding throughout the organization. So in that HR as well, you can see things like leave requests. How does someone request time off, and who approves that? How does that work today? Travel requests. Somebody needs to go on a business trip. How do you submit that? Is it by email? And many times it is, or by a simple travel form. But again, it's something you have to download. You have to fill it out, send it as an attachment by email. We want to make this more systematic and drive automation every opportunity we can. In finance, purchasing, again, this is something we see very, very common. Someone wants a simple purchase request form that then perhaps is something as simple as just submitting it, getting approval, having someone aware that it needs to be, it's been approved and it needs to be purchased and procured, and or tying into an ERP system, a financial system that, once these things do get approved, then it's connected through API, through some connector to that. So it could be simple, it could be much more complex. It could serve as the front end to your back end financial system. So employees can do these things, but really all the actions taking place on the back end. A number of opportunities to leverage request management. So now that we've kind of just talked through these examples, and look, there's numerous. In fact, many times we're not even aware of how our customers are using NITRO Studio, because once they get proficient, they're self-sufficient, they just start building things. They start building processes, they start building forms, they start inserting workflow behind that, and we have no idea what they're even doing until finally we connect and we hear all the creative things that they've built with the platform. These are just examples, kind of common examples that we see. Some of these, right, that we just showed you, we built as out-of-the-box solutions because they've been requested so many hundreds of times. But there's so many other things that our customers are doing. I want to jump into a couple case studies. So Ryan Stefani's joined us today. He's our solutions engineer. He works with customers to understand their needs, to understand what it's going to take to accomplish those needs with our products. And I'm going to turn this time over to Ryan so he can talk through a couple of our customers in the food and beverage industry who have been able to take advantage kind of in a sort of a broad way throughout the organization, and he'll talk through each one of those cases.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. I think I'm going to start with this company called Standard Meat. So, I mean, my position at Crow Canyon's been changing, ever changing since I started here, from handling initial contacts to demos, all the way through the solutions engineer. So I've had the chance to actually see them grow, mature with Crow Canyon, and it's been quite interesting. So their CIO came to me for a help desk, just like a standard IT help desk. And I think when you look at kind of like what Jeff was saying, when you look at our applications holistically, I think there's applications and I think there's templates. And an IT application is pretty straightforward, right? A ticket comes in, unlike most ticket, right? More or less, every process is the same. And what's interesting about that is once we got their IT rolling downhill, it really started to open up interest inside of the organization to handle other business processes. Simple things, well, not simple, but simple to us in the sense of out-of-the-box applications. The next maturation was onboarding. Onboarding specifically for, say, an IT department. Hey, when a new hire request comes in, I need to make sure these 15 tasks get done, these 20 tasks get done, and I want to know that who they're assigned to, what their due dates are, so that when the person starts, we have all of the P's and C's done, so they can come on effectively and efficiently, right? Really managing that project or that process. And then for them, that transitioned into purchasing. And at first, it all kind of tied around this IT principle of IT onboarding and IT purchasing, right? Ryan needs a new laptop, he needs a new monitor, he needs a new, set of headphones, whether it's a part of a new hire or simply as a replacement. And it was actually really cool to see it mature inside of the organization, like I was saying, because then we started to get other departments come to us and say like, oh, that's interesting, what can you do for us? How can you help us? Because in a lot of instances we find, especially in like food and beverage, is that a lot of the forms are paper-based, still like manual processes, running forms down the hall. It was interesting after the initial kind of implementation for help desk, IT onboarding, and purchasing. We did a slew of custom applications for Standard Meat, and they primarily centered around the production of their goods. So they are a meat company, right? Funny, I know, Standard Meat, producing meat and other various meat products. And it has to go through an R&D and a testing process. And all of that research and testing was done manually. It was done on paper forms, walking the shop floor. And what we did was we leveraged our request manager tool, right? So one of the iterations, the generic iteration of it, and basically said, okay, we need to handle a new, what was the correct terminology? Sorry. It was a new feature request from a customer, from a client of theirs for a new product, right? I can't remember exactly if it was bacon or whatever, right? But now they have to go through, requests has come in. I went through an approval process, right? A grouped approval. Do we want to take this on? Is this something that we want to add into our umbrella of offerings? Once it passed through the grouped approval, then it went into production, right? And now it's tracking almost like a, like a ticket in that sense. It went from production to testing to Q&A to customer testing to final product. And that was something that was all email based in the past, and now is an automated process as a part of our, request management umbrella inside of the Standard Meat organization. And then it's almost like a puzzle being fit together. It's really quite interesting, right? Because if we talk about IT and onboarding, I mean, now HR is like, okay, how do I get involved in this onboarding process so it goes above and beyond just IT? It's actually quite strategic on our part because, I think when you deal with multiple departments collaborating on a single application, it's almost like, no pun intended, too many cooks in the kitchen, right? So it was like, let's start small and then grow on top of that. So the next, our phase 3 in this sense was bringing in HR to the onboarding tool. Part B of phase 3 was now purchasing. Made a lot more sense to involve a secondary department, in this case finance, so that when things needed to be purchased for product or for anything inside of the organization, now instead of just it being centered to IT, purchasing could be roped in to manage the whole tool. And then the next piece was, okay, we're getting vendors requesting things from us, but we don't actually have a vendor request system, right? So how do we manage and maintain vendors inside of our application? And that was another iteration of our request management tool, except instead of a product, all of the vendors had to go through the appropriate certifications. Are you OSHA compliant? Do I have your W-9? Do I have, all of these subset of documents that were specific to a vendor? Form was configured specifically to, vendor A, vendor B, vendor C type, and then can be configured to match the particular requirements of sub-vendor. And they go through that same process. It's reviewed, it's approved, and then essentially it gets added to the vendor list. I know I'm getting excited. I feel like a nerd, but here's the cool part. Now the vendors list is the system of record across all the other applications: onboarding, purchasing, product, right? So instead of having to use these multiple disparate siloed applications where vendors lives in a SQL database and product is in a custom third-party tool and IT is in SharePoint. They all have to connect to each other, and I have to understand every single code in the world to make sure that it all connects. It's all inside of your 365 space, and it's all connected through a series of lists. Jeff made a mention of this feature that we call associated items in our forms tool, and it makes it possible. And to be honest, the Standard Meat thing was Standard Meat account is one of my babies, so I was really excited to see that grow. And then recently, we've actually started working on the next piece, which is software requests. So now it's trying to manage and maintain those applications, because the CIO and I talk all the time, and it's like, well, we got to bring this in, and now we can use that same request management system to make sure that, hey, any software that's being added to the system, whether it's anything as simple as Zoom licenses all the way to ERP systems, is going through a vetting process, and it is all copacetic with the applications they've already put in place using Crow Canyon and Office 365.
Hey Ryan, can I jump and ask you a question with regards to Standard Meat and other customers that use use this tool? What is the standard initial engagement and then the natural organic progression of the use and expansion of NITRO Studio in business process automation, request management throughout the organization? What does that typically look like? How do people get started, and how do people then continue to drive value?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a few different ways. I mean, the initial engagement is typically around a particular problem, right? Well, it's a slew of business processes that need to be automated, right? But what does that mean? In some cases, like in Standard Meat, it was an IT help desk. In other cases, like Ventura Food, it was really around, well, more along the lines of the product research and development and release of product to vendors. So it really starts with like a pain point, right? And it comes from the top in the sense of, we need to use 365 and we have to solve this pain point. And what I've seen is that they come to us with a particular issue that needs to be corrected, but there's also these other subline things that are tied to the issue or independent, I'll be honest, but more often than not tied to the issue, that also need to be solved. So it does happen organically in certain instances, but really once we've agreed that 365 is the choice, and we put this, phased, I guess you can call it a phased implementation process in place, where, this massive pain point that everyone has headaches about internally, where everyone, kicks their feet when they have to fill out the paper form. It's semi-organic in the sense that we can guide the organization through the process of, hey, look at how we've solved this problem here. And then those initial questions start to come up from those other departments, like, oh, can we use that for X problem or Y problem? Unbeknownst to them, maybe our main contact at in this case Standard Meat has already recommended that we look at those, but we wanted to put a proof of concept in place first, show how we can accomplish something, and then grow from there.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Yeah, I think I see that that's generally how people come with a specific problem. Once we address that, to what you're saying, is I think that that's kind of an important thing to consider, is that one of the things we don't want to push is, let's do it all right now. Yeah. But let's find a logical place to start. And once you find that logical place to start and you can prove it out and you can show that it works, we find that in 99% of the cases, at that point, organizations then find other ways in which they can continue to drive the the automation in various ways, right? Whether it's in the same department or whether it's in multiple departments. So, but if you got to find a place to start, I think every organization has a place to start, and we can also help to identify that. So that's why we encourage one-on-one calls. We do demos. We have creative conversations. We've been exposed to hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of different organizations, and we see what they're doing internally. So we become, I think, as a sort of trusted advisor to our clients, and that we have these insights that they don't necessarily see, so we can provide suggestions and or guidance around how to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I mean, just think about like, the two examples we just discussed in terms of Ventura Foods and Standard Meat. I mean, Ventura Foods essentially paved the way for us to knock off that product and research development request manager for Standard Meat. Essentially, it becomes, oh, you're in the same industry, you're looking to solve the same problem. Yes, we've done that for other customers in the past. We know how to start, and we can provide those best practices to make sure it gets done correctly, on time, on budget, etc.
Yeah, super helpful. Thanks, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
So Ventura Foods, Ryan. So this is another one of your sort of clients that you would consider kind of one of your babies that you worked for a long time. So one of the things, and you just mentioned them just earlier, but can you kind of talk through? You mentioned what they're looking for, the solution itself. I think maybe you've covered that, but can you just kind of describe sort of the benefits that they continue to see or that they're driving within the organization as kind of a result of what they've implemented?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, they provided a unique problem versus like Standard Meat. Standard Meat's in one location. Everyone's under the same house. So while they did need, to automate a lot of the processes, it took more time to get people to buy in, because they're like, oh, I'm just going to go yell at Ryan to do this because I can see him, right? So with Ventura Foods, they're spread out across the entire U.S. They have headquarters here in California, and then they have locations in Minnesota and in New York and Texas. And so it became inherently more difficult to manage and maintain, paper or manual or email-based processes across multiple locations. So they follow that same kind of path, particularly in the Ventura location of Ventura Foods down Southern California of, hey, I have this R&D project, or hey, I have this work order request system, or hey, I have this health and safety site that I need to build requests on. But then what opened up, kind of, I guess you could call phase 2 or maybe even phase 3 at this point, was how do we connect our plants together? How do we have an an intercompany communicative platform so that we're all, if we're working on the same project, we can collaborate without things dropping on the floor, getting lost. And that was really the maturation process we saw with Ventura Foods, and one of the things we pushed internally, going as far as creating training documentation specifically around NITRO Studio, PowerPoint presentations to particular locations as to why it's important. And we really started to flesh the fingers out and started to spread NITRO through the organization, so that when things came up, let's talk about this research and development particularly. There are certain instances where location A and location B were working on the same thing, but they weren't communicating. So at the end of the product development lifecycle, management would come in and be like, well, we wasted, X amount of thousands of dollars on 2 teams working on the same thing. We need to be smarter about that. So what we've done is we've eliminated that need to be under the same roof using NITRO Studio. It's in the same, you all have access to the application, the same site, and now through workflow automation and notifications and teams, you can communicate between, location A across the country, across the world in certain instances, and location B, and have that connectability, communication levels that are so granular that you can see when someone breathes or moves. And when you're in in an industry like food or beverage, and something is very important, everything needs to be dotted and crossed, it really has become a way to open up all the doors inside of their organization to make sure they're all on the same page and same platform. Super interesting build out with that particular organization.
Yeah, so we had a couple statements from our customers, and I think it's always interesting when a customer, makes a comment. I've been on a number of calls with customers where they have made, interesting comments about how they feel about our products. I was on a phone call. This has nothing to do with food and beverage, but I was on a call not too long ago with an airline. One of our customers is an airline, and you know, as they were looking at NITRO Studio, they're looking at competitive products, they're looking at the Power Platform, they're looking at, you know, Nintex, or looking at others. They ended up settling on NITRO Studio for a number of reasons that she stated. One was budget. We happen to be a more affordable solution. The other was just scalability and power of the solution for the money, you know, that it costs to, you know, to purchase this, you know, NITRO Studio. One of the things she said that I thought was very, very interesting, and I repeat this quite a bit, but she said, as a SharePoint professional, she said, NITRO Studios made me love my job again. Now, that might sound like an exaggeration. Maybe she was being melodramatic. I don't know, but I'll take that as a win from our perspective, that, you know, if we can create a piece of software that makes somebody love their job, I think that's a big win, and I'll take it, because I don't know that I've ever used a piece of software that actually made me love my job. But it was one of those things. I still think, you know, in her being genuine, is that what she's trying to say is that, you know, this significantly enhanced her ability to do her job more effectively. In this particular case with Ventura Foods, one of the challenges out of the box SharePoint, and we'll call it, you know, in M365, the out of the box tool itself and what you can do, there's some limitations. So we've created a number of, you know, with the framework that sits in, you know, on top of SharePoint, we've overcome a lot of those and created a lot of features and things that aren't part of the out of the box experience, to make it easier for you to accomplish, you know, these tasks that were before, even if you could do that, and you still were, there was a lot of labor intensive, you know, pieces of it that still needed to take place. So that was a big deal for them, is like, look, we wanted to be there, we were there, but there's limitations that prohibited us from doing this well. And they, you know, they were looking at other products. Again, I mentioned Nintex earlier. You know, we love them, they're great, they're a great product, great company, great people, we know them very well. But, you know, we compete against them, and I think that we compete in a, you know, there's, of course, we call it healthy competition, but we compete in such a way where we become very, very attractive in the sense that, you know, if you're on a budget, we're your choice. If you want scalability, you want power, you know, we still have all that at a price point that's attractive. So yeah, it's great to hear these comments. Now, another thing too, what we wanted, not to get in a full demo, a lot of we do these webinars and we get into a demo and we show you kind of just hands-on and play with it and go through sort of a step-by-step demo. We didn't want to do that during this because we had a lot of slides, we had a lot that we wanted to cover. We wanted to give you more sort of a sneak peek, sort of preview on, you know, what we're talking about with request management in the food and beverage industry, how our customers are using it, but we did want to show you kind of what we're talking about. So really it's just a couple screenshots here of our forms tool. We'll talk about workflow, and then we'll talk about sort of the reporting and dashboards and visibility. I'm going to have Ryan kind of talk through, because he works with clients to develop these forms specific to their needs, some very simple, some very complex. I'll let Ryan talk through what that forms tool is all about and why it's so powerful.
Yeah, I think I can see it in my sleep now. Yeah, so the forms tool is interesting. I know it's the leader in the space. I've spent a lot of time with other forms tools, other organizations, like Chef's at Nintex is great, but I think from a forms perspective, we really set the standard inside of Office 365. From the simple side, it's intended to be WYSIWYG, drag and drop, you know, like column creation, tab creation, adding columns onto the form, creating tabs on the form. The base level form design, you know, if you've never dealt with SharePoint before, I can get you up to speed in an hour, right? It really is that simple. Now, in my opinion, I see the forms tool break down into 3 different levels. We have UI UX, design, like I was just describing. Second would be SharePoint specifics. And the third is more developer-centric tools. So I think what's cool about it is that the use case or the target audience can really vary from end user, for them filling out a simple form like we talked about through these various request systems. Hey, I need A, B, and C, and I need it by this date. To a power user going in and adding more columns to the form for the end user to say like, okay, yep, here's the date I need it by, but where's the date I will accept it by, right? And adding more columns to that particular form, all the way to maybe a SharePoint developer where they want to add unique permissions. Hey, you can only see this form if you are an A, B, and C group, or you're in the management group. Or, hey, you know what? I'm used to having repeating rows from InfoPath, and I want to build out a table in this form. To the third level of having it being more developer-centric, to calling REST APIs or SQL databases, or pulling from Active Directory. So I think, comparing us to, say, maybe like Power Platform, where you have to be a developer to develop a Power App or a form. In our particular instance, because we have the out-of-the-box applications that are intended to be Power user-friendly, it really does hit a wide variety of groups inside of the 365 space, which it does make it quite nice.
Hey Ryan, real quick, can I ask you a question on the forms themselves, just because I've from a UI UX perspective, one is how often, and then how do we deal with this scenario? Someone comes and says, look, I have a very specific form look and feel or format. We talk to our government clients and they have to follow a certain form. How often does that happen, and how do we actually deal with that, making sure forms, they look pretty, they adhere to whatever format that you'd like it to internally based on what you already have or what you'd like it to be? How often does that happen, and how do we deal with that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say it happens pretty frequently. If you were to pin me down and twist my arm, I would say 50% or just about 50% of the time when it comes to form design and development. Either from certain people are particular and they like to see the form a certain way, or it has to be a certain way, like you're mentioning with government, or even standard meat in certain instances have to have their form fit a certain format. So now we're really going to get into my nerdy side in the NITRO Studio toolset, which is our print manager. And basically, think of it as like a mail merge, right? Where you can take information captured on the form, like I was saying, dates, need, etc., and then populate that information into a template. And that's something that we can build with you. We can leverage an existing Word document that you have, an existing Excel document, but end goal is that when we've worked our way through the workflow, we have this form spit out that matches exactly the way you want it to look, formatted the way you want it to be formatted, and it's all copacetic inside the process. What's great about that is that people that need to see that form only see the end result. They don't have to deal with the A through Z process to get there. It shows up in their inbox, perfectly formatted the way they needed to have formatted.
So in terms of segueing here, when we talk about request manager, at the very, very basic, simple request as a form that gets submitted into a system, and we'll just say that just simply goes into the system. Somebody then can go in there and work on that request. But beyond that, is what we'll call custom actions and workflow. Let's kind of address that. So there's the very, very simple request, all the way to something that's much more complex with an extensive workflow behind it. So now we're going to get into our workflow manager and talk a little bit about that, and sort of the scalability, how powerful it might be, how easy it is to use.
Yeah, workflows are interesting. So there's kind of two sides of the workflow coin inside of NITRO Studio. There's the custom actions, like Jeff mentioned, which are manually invoked workflows on the form, right? So why those are important. Maybe talking about a purchase request, being able to save it and then come back and actually run it through the approval process. Maybe you're working through a production of a new product, and when you get to the end, you want to submit it through an approval process or run it through the next level. Being able to run that workflow when you choose can be freeing, in a sense of you're not tied to a particular timeline, but more to when the form is ready to be submitted for a workflow. And then the workflow tool itself is more like triggers based around actions. Hey, when this form is saved, or when we update a particular form, or more importantly, based on a date or time column, run these actions. So like, hey, every Monday at 9 a.m., I want to send my boss a rundown of what we did the previous week. And then the designer interface, my canned response is, if I can do it, you can do it, right? I mean, I'm a power user, but I mean, it really is intended to be a WYSIWYG. Very simply, it can be a send to email, send Teams messages tool where notifications go out around those date and time cadences, all the way through to again, the more developer-centric side of the workflow tool, which could be calling REST APIs, and anywhere in between. And I think that's one of the things that I like to highlight is that, yes, it is easy to use, very simple. Again, within an hour, I can get you sending email notifications around date and times, all the way to, hey, Ryan, I need to build out an API connector to Oracle or to QuickBooks or to whatever, and it has that flexibility and capability to do so. So to kind of sum up, very easy to use from a standard everyday process to having the same developer-centric tools that we have inside of the forms manager.
Yeah, so as we're building out these business processes, we're digitizing these things. One of the things that we found important, even in our own business, incredibly important, is to manage by numbers, right? Metrics, looking at data, trying to understand visibility. So, I mean, how do you hold people accountable if you're not even aware of what's going on? So let's talk about this next step in the process. Is now that we've built these things, how is it that we manage and manage the business from a business intelligence perspective and gaining insights? When we're right there, we got this slide up right here. It talks about dashboards. Let's talk about that part of it, and how extensive it is, how customizable it is, who might need to see data in what format.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, really good question. So I do a lot of our trainings for NITRO Studio, during the initial implementation process, and rightfully so, the forms and the workflow get a lot of love, right? Anytime we're dealing with an item, it's a form, it's a workflow, right? Everyone focuses on that. But more often than not, and it's okay, Ryan, now what do I do? How do I present this to my team? Because I think in SharePoint inherently out of the box, it has massive limitations around permissions and permission structures. Who can see what? When can they see it? How can they see it? And the ancillary pieces of NITRO Studio, these dashboards that you're seeing, the reports, the tiles, the list view web parts, they all provide a unique experience targeted towards a specific user or user group. So very simply, it can be what's equal to me or what's equal to my department. So from an end user's perspective, I want to submit. I want to see the status. I want to maybe search knowledge base, right? From an internal perspective, I want to view my workload. How many open requests do I have? What statuses are they in? Who has requests assigned to them, and how many requests assigned to them? And then from a management or an admin perspective, what's our overall health of the request system? How quickly are we responding? How much are they taking on? Do we need to add more resources to that department? And what's interesting about this is that using those tools of NITRO Studio, you can break those out and permission them specifically to those targeted groups. So there's not intermingling, right? You don't want an end user seeing what an admin sees. You don't want a technician seeing what an end user sees. So the dashboards, in my opinion, while they don't get the same publicity as the forms and the workflows, are equally or more important based off of the usability, their ease of use inside of the 365 space. So I think massively important, and I think the dashboard building is not only fun and cool and creative, but also a key crutch of what we do inside of all of our applications.
Yeah. So how we see this out there, and again, even within our own organization, you have executive dashboards, so you get that executive view of what's going on, and they're going to want to see some summary, right, of what's going on. And then of course you go down the management chain. You have a manager sees what's going on within their group. You have maybe a lead, or you have a technician to see what's going on within their own world. Even if you're an Outlook wizard and you're super organized and you're getting emails even to a shared mailbox, and then that's all organized in there, it's still, you're not going to be able to drive any business intelligence. It's going to be one of those things that how do you manage due dates and who's responded when? How do you make sure nothing gets lost? This is where we see people still using or it's a spreadsheet, right, and managing that in a sort of a horizontal linear format. Is that this gives us the ability to not only take requests in a simple way, which improves the customer employee experience, but also from whoever's working on that is to have a system of record, automation dashboards, reporting, and simplify our work in such a way that where it does allow us to do more with less. You know, it reduces the manual effort, it reduces the cost to serve, and improves things. For example, even if it's something in a production, like, you know, like QA, for example, you know, is there a way, or product management, is there a way for us to drive efficiencies, do more with less? You know, unfortunately, we're in sort of economic challenging times. We have sometimes even, you know, challenge with labor in the labor force. You know, today, I think the theme, and for us, and what we're trying to do is promote this idea that we actually do help our customers do more with less, and the cost of our solutions, you know, are easily justified in the sense that, you know, you couldn't even hire an individual to take on this responsibility for the cost of this program. You know, but then again, it costs, this program itself, you know, can affect, as you already saw, the entire enterprise throughout various, or, you know, departmental groups. So now that we've come to the end of this, guys, I hope that at least you kind of catch the vision of request management, you know, in the food and beverage industry. We have a lot of customers, we have a lot of experience. We'd love to, and Ryan mentioned this kind of term that we use all the time, is best practices. Because we have this sort of wide exposure to multiple peers of yours in the industry, you know, we see what's happening, we see what they're doing, and then we can help, you know, brainstorm with you and bring things that we've already done in the past, or we've already built, and help to accelerate your digital transformation, you know, through sort of these request management processes within your organization as well. So we'd love to hear from you. You'll probably, after this, you're going to get a, you know, a follow-up email saying thanks for attending. You'll likely get a phone call from us as well. So just full transparency, we're going to reach out and do our best to connect and see if we can't offer some insights, and to, you know, how you might kind of go down this path, this journey, in exploring digital transformation within you know, your organization. So reach out to us, we'll reach out to you, and hopefully we can connect soon. Appreciate your time today. Ryan, thanks for jumping on board, and Krista, again, this back to you. Thanks for getting this kicked off.
All right, thanks everyone. We really appreciate you joining us today, and we'll be in touch. Again, any questions, you can give us a call, 925-478-3110. Thanks again.
Thank you.